This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
Hi, good evening. Welcome. The Technology Management Program is delighted to be joined by Tom Patterson, the CEO of Wize, Inc. He's a serial entrepreneur and also is the entrepreneur in residence with the Mayfield Fund, and he's worked for Procter & Gamble, PeopleSoft, and Respond.com. His academic background includes a BS in chemical engineering from RPI and a MBA Harvard Business School. The theme for this evening's lecture is Getting Wise, Making Sense of Web 2.0. So please welcome our keynote speaker, Tom Patterson.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I'm going to move around a bit, and I know we don't have, we have about an hour. I like to make this discussion as thought-provoking as we can by just throwing out a bunch of ideas. We certainly won't be able to cover all of technology and startups and Web 2.0, but if I can do anything, I'd love to impart some of the thoughts that I have that have helped me along the way, and certainly we'll have some time for questions at the end. Can I ask a few questions? Who's freshman here? Or first year? You guys call it first years, right? Sophomores? Juniors? Seniors? Okay. Who in this room Facebooks once a day? At least. Who uses Facebook overall here? Almost everybody? Who doesn't use Facebook? All right, Luddites. Okay, what about Google? Who uses Google once a day? Who's never used Google here? Because if you said yes, you'd be lying, right? So what about, have you heard of, who's used MySpace before? Everybody? Who hasn't used MySpace? How many engineers do we have in the room? Raise your hand. How many folks are business? Arts? Who's done it all? Who's like a combination of all those things? I knew there'd be a few folks here. Are you guys, who's from California? Originally, okay. Who knows what Web 2.0 is? Oh, wow, because I don't. So maybe I'll ask you guys later. So we'll get into that in a second, because Web 2.0 is kind of a misunderstood kind of term, and it's good because it actually covers a lot of stuff. So I'm going to probably start off with where I've been, because that may give you some context. And I'll tell you my story. So I actually grew up in upstate New York. I was a chemical engineer first. I went to a school called RPI on the East Coast. I left RPI and was considered going into working in an oil refinery or a chemicals plant as a chemical engineer. And I actually went to work at Procter & Gamble, Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was telling some of the folks here at lunch today, one of my first jobs was, they called me in the office and they said, Tom, go make women's hair shinier. And being a chemical engineer, I was kind of going, well, how am I supposed to do that? And part of the issue was trying to define what the problem is. Who's the consumer? What are they trying to do? And how do you actually develop something that meets that specific need? So what you're going to find a little bit about me, and the theme of my life is about focusing on the customer and understanding what they want and delivering a solution against the customer's needs. So after Procter & Gamble, I went to Harvard Business School. It was around 1994, 95, and I graduated in 96 from there. And at that time, who knows when Netscape came out? Did Netscape come out right around 95, I think? Right around then. I think the internet boom happened right about at that time. Some of you guys, I think, were in high school then. Is that right? Probably, or maybe a little bit younger. So there's this crazy stuff going on, right? Netscape came out, and everyone was kind of going, what's this thing called the internet? And so I actually left Harvard Business School, and I went to a company called PeopleSoft. I don't know if you guys ever heard of PeopleSoft, but PeopleSoft, who's heard of PeopleSoft? So PeopleSoft at one time was one of the top 5 software companies in the world. One of my interviews was around what PeopleSoft was trying to do, and I remember one of the key questions was they were trying to build all the business process software so the companies can operate on the back end. Things like finance, HR, things like manufacturing, where you actually had software to interact with that captured all the data so you could run the operations. And previous to that, it was a lot of disconnected systems. I left PeopleSoft at the end of the time in the late 90s, and I went to work at a company called Respond. We actually raised about $45 million in capital. You can buy a lot of lattes with $45 million. And we went through, kind of that crazy time, which was the end of the internet boom. And what happened is we grew the company to a decent size. We were about to do some great stuff. And all of a sudden, in 2000, the internet actually kind of crashed. Does anybody remember that time? Right? The stock market, NASDAQ, right, was at 5,000. And it kind of crashed down to around 2,000. And that you lose a lot of value when the NASDAQ crashes. So it made it very tough for a lot of companies to go forward. After I left Respond, I kind of said, the next businesses I'm going to go in are going to be businesses where I can understand the products, I can understand the companies, or the consumers that we're going to be affecting. So I went to a company called Market Tools, and Market Tools was a company. I don't know if you guys have ever used a tool called Zoomerang. Anybody heard of Zoomerang? A couple folks here. Well, so what Zoomerang is, and I encourage you guys to use it, I still think we have a free option on it. It allows you to do really fast surveys to your friends and to people you know to get some data. And so make a long story short, at Market Tools, I joined them at the beginning of 2000, and I was with the company for about 4 or 5 years. We grew from 0 in revenue to about 60 million when I left, and now Market Tools is doing much more than that. During my time there, I got to run operations, I got to build technology, I got to do product management, and I got to start up an office in India. I got to fly to India. I went to India once a month for a year and a half. And I flew coach class, which I don't recommend to do so frequently to India because it's about 40 hours each way. And it was an incredible experience, actually. This is a side note on seeing the incredible growth in India in a short period of time. Because what we were doing was we were kind of offshoring a number of our different product applications there. So, through all this, I'll give you a little quick synopsis of what Market Tools does. What Market Tools was doing is basically taking and saying that doing market research, which is effectively talking to customers, can be done a lot more effectively if you apply technology to it. And you can do surveys very quick and actually use some tools to actually give people back insight. And we were starting to experiment with the idea that the web is a great representation of what people say offline. So the example was, 10 plus years ago, and even shorter than that, the way we figured out what camera to buy or what movie to go see, how do we do it? It's funny, right? There was no Rotten Tomatoes. There was no Google, right? So how'd you figure it out? What you did is you had to talk with someone who was a friend or in a coffee shop, or you read the paper, right? Who reads a newspaper here? Anyone? Right, not as many folks that would have said that, a while back, right? I hardly read the paper on a normal basis because I get all my stuff. It comes to me, I get to click on stuff and get exactly what I want. So when I was at Market Tools, there was this big thing around, the web is this great proxy for what everyone is saying offline, and all the conversation is happening online now, okay? And we were doing was we were starting to sell custom projects to people like Procter & Gamble about how good their products were because we were mining the chat rooms and the user reviews for what people were saying. And we were figuring out they were saying positive and negative things. The same things that were being said in coffee shops or at the movies or by the beach. We had records of all this stuff now. So we were selling them for good clips, $50,000. And they're writing us checks, 50 grand. Who wants a check for 50 grand? right? Because I do, you know. And I was going, that's a lot of money. They're paying this money because it's actually providing value to these guys. And then this idea came to me that said, you know, what if we could take the web and mine it, answer questions, and then give those answers to people so they can do things relative to buying stuff. Now, believe me, it's a lot clearer now what I'm telling you than it was when I was leaving Market Tools, but that idea stayed with me. So I was in the process of leaving Market Tools. I took a little time off to go surfing, and I'm very jealous of the surf break you guys got out here. It's a little colder up in Northern California, that's for sure. But then this idea just kept popping in my head, and in the process of going to start it, a buddy of mine who's at a company called Mayfield Fund said, why don't you consider coming in and becoming an entrepreneur in residence? Who knows what an entrepreneur in residence is? Okay, we got one person back here. So I got to tell you, this is the coolest job you can get. Basically, they pay you to come into work and do what you want, okay? And I mean that a little facetiously. They pay you to think about your idea and come up with an idea you're going to go start, right? But what they do is they give you a card, and they say, here's our card. We know everybody. We know the people at Google. We know the people at Yahoo. We know the people at LinkedIn. We know the people at Facebook. We're investing in all these companies that are coming through. You can go talk to them. And you know what? Buy them dinner. Okay? It's on us. And I said, that's probably the coolest job I've ever heard before. Okay? I show up when I want. I've got a travel account. And I get to go talk to some of the smartest people in the Valley. Right? But the flip side, right, is that anytime, you know, I'm sure you guys are extremely motivated, you set out to do something, you've got the responsibility to yourself, really, to say, let's make the most. I'm sure a lot of you are here tonight to listen because you have aspirations and ambitions to do some pretty cool stuff. And you're going to make the most of your education, which I can't recommend any greater because it had such a huge impact on my life because it taught me how to learn, which allows me to read things now and consume because I've got some basic principles down, even chemical engineering. But anyway, I got to go into Mayfield, and I got to just go work on every cool idea that was out there. But I kept incubating this idea that I talked to you guys about, which was, what if we just took the web and were able to put together this database that helped answer questions? So getting to my end of my 6 months there, I started at Yancey, and I started to move down the path. I met this incredible technologist who got 2 PhDs in 2.5 years and just loved to build stuff for fun. Does anybody love to build stuff for fun here? Really do engineering work for fun? Raise your hand. I mean, there's a certain personality type that people might say crazy, but I say that's very interesting, right? And my point is, he just loved to build stuff. He'd build like Sudoku websites just overnight because he thought it was a really cool idea. So I remember going to meet him at the Starbucks, and we just started jamming on ideas. We started talking about what was possible and what you could do. And therein, I said to myself, I got to work with this guy. I have to work with this guy because we get along. It's not about me or him and our egos. It's about coming together and working on ideas because that's fun stuff. So we met. We decided, you know, we're going to go for it. We're going to start this company that I've been telling you guys about, and I'll talk to you about it a little bit more after I talk a little about Web 2.0. And I was moving down the path to raise that money from Mayfield, right? And Mayfield was the fund I was with as an EIR. And this company called Wize launched, W-I-Z-E, in Minnesota. And I was like, that's our idea. And I was kind of, what am I going to do? I was thinking, what am I going to do? Do I just go compete against these guys? Because I was never one to back down from a fight. So I decided to fly out to Minnesota. I met this guy named Doug Baker, great guy. He'd started a number of companies before. He was involved in this last company, was a company called Air Force Nutri-Soda. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but what it is, it's like a Red Bull can with a bunch of vitamins inside that's a soda that's, you know, good for your immune system or good for your, good for your reflexes or something to that effect. And they just sold it to Pepsi Americas for a whole bunch of money. So here's a guy, the serial entrepreneur. We sat down, we went to Capitol Grill in Minnesota, right on Hennepin Ave. He didn't know me, I didn't know him, and we just started talking about this idea that he was working on than I had, and we came from two very different directions. And at the end of that conversation 3 hours later, we were like, we got to work together. So the same phenomena of me meeting my partner Rajesh who was technical partner, I met Doug and I said, you know what, we get along. It's not about ego, it's about the idea. And at that point, that convinced me, let's go together and let's go raise money, which I did in the beginning of this year from Bessemer. I don't know if you guys heard of Skype or Blue Nile and Yelp. Those are the guys that invested in that company, as well as Mayfield. We raised $4 million, and now I'm in process of scaling out Wize, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But I wanted to give you that landscape of me, because it might give you some context in the question and answer session. So let me just touch base since we're at school again, and I walked around campus and I could just feel all the energy from you guys, learning and doing super cool stuff and programs, and I heard from people that are running this program and that program. There's one thing I can give you guys just about how I always had this dream I was going to be a CEO at a specific time in my life. I said, from a very early age, I want to be my own boss and I want to try it. I didn't know the internet was going to come around. I wasn't sure what a CEO really did, but I said, that just seems like something that I want to do. And what I can tell you is 3 things that helped me get there as fast as I think that I could have gotten there, revolved around making the most of your opportunities. And I'll share with you kind of 3 guiding career principles that I had. One was, it shouldn't be about the money if you can help it. There's a certain level of money you need at first to pay bills. My Domino's was only $5.37. That's a pretty good deal. You can buy a lot of Domino's. You can eat Domino's every day. You don't need that much money to survive, guys. You know what I mean? And so my point on that is that there's going to come along the pathway. There's going to be a whole bunch of opportunities to go make money, and I think that you should consider them. But my advice is to consider things that you might love to do over money if you got the opportunity. New opportunities where you get to try something you're really going to like, that you feel in your gut, these are good. I think the second thing is that consider the learning of a thing. I mean, I've talked to so many people. My brother actually runs a modeling agency in New York City. And you might have seen his show. He did a show called The Agency that was on VH1. And my brother started very early on in his career as a booker in fashion. And bookers don't get paid very much money at all. But you kind of do this to get the learning. So he wanted to break in. So he did whatever it took because he knew that he enjoyed this industry a bunch. And I guess what I'm getting at is that we talked about doing what you love over money. Consider getting the learnings by doing whatever it takes over money, because sometimes those are way more important because they provide you with an opportunity to do something next later. And the third thing that I think that you should just keep in mind is that there's guys like Mark Zuckerberg who's involved with Facebook and people that have done some amazing stuff, right? And as great and smart as they are about some of the great stuff they've done, there's luck involved in life, There's just luck. And some people hit it real fast, and sometimes it takes longer. Okay, but it doesn't mean the effort is any less grand than to go after something and continue to try. The CEO of PeopleSoft, who is one of the biggest companies in the world, he tried 4 times in his startups beforehand, and they weren't as successful, quote unquote, except for the fact that you could look at them as successes because he learned stuff, and he hit it, with PeopleSoft towards the end, which was, expanded like a number of years. So I guess what I'm getting at is just remember there's luck involved with just about everything, and so just keep that in mind. You can't control all that at times, but keep plugging and good things happen. So let me talk a little bit about the web and the web's evolution and this whole kind of concept of 2.0. So let me ask a question. So what is Web 2.0?
Websites where the content is user-generated and people kind of link in and they get involved with the community, or they create something rather than just sort of reading a site that's in front of them. Okay.
Anybody else? Web 2.0?
It's a buzzword and it doesn't mean anything.
Well, buzzword doesn't mean anything. The cynic. So I think so what I would say is that this is my interpretation of Web.0, and I think you're Web 2.0, and I think that I would summarize it as user-generated content as well. I think people have tried to add a lot of different things such as technologies to it, different types of viral effects that take place. But at the end of the day, I kind of draw it on the board, Web 2.0 is about a conversation or content that's being created by not people that work inside the company, but by companies that give people the power to create stuff. Does anybody use Wikipedia here? It's a pretty good tool, right? You can find stuff pretty quick. How many people at Wikipedia actually created the content? You know the answer to that for it? What do you think? Who thinks 0? Yeah, pretty close, right? They have empowered people to actually manage Wikipedia. And it's, you know, I remember seeing the story, and I don't know for a fact. You guys remember Encyclopedia Britannicas? Right? Those are these books that are nasty. I was telling people at lunch today, my family can only afford up to G, so I can only do reports on A through G. And the minute that we had to do a report on, you know, something like Washington, George Washington, I was in trouble, and I had to go down and beg my buddy to borrow his Encyclopedia Britannica. But now we got Wikipedia, and instantaneously, you guys can get on there and find out just about everything, right? And so my point is that that is created by empowering the world to go do that. Who wants, does anybody here contribute to Wikipedia? Raise your hand. Well, it's, you know, it's good. I mean, it's cool, right? But a small group of people, right? It takes some time, right, to go do that stuff. And what you're going to find in almost all Web 2.0 communities, well, how many people in this room think that of a Web 2.0 community, okay, let's just talk about that. Of the content that's created in a Web 2.0 community, how many people think greater than 5% is working to create that content on any site, MySpace, Facebook, etc.? Greater than 5%? So what's wild about it, and I know you guys understood my question, and so I'm sorry if it wasn't clear, but typically in these small communities, less than 1% of the people are the highly active users that actually create a majority of the content because they have affinity for that group. At Wikipedia, it's less than 1% of the people that use Wikipedia that actually create a majority of the content and contribute it, because they're the highly active users that are there. So what I'm getting at is that Web 2.0 has been this phenomenon with blogs, with forums and discussions, with community sites. We talked about all the people using Facebook here. Well, people are now empowered to create a tremendous amount of content, and it is growing at an incredible rate. And it's helping us answer questions, just like in the Wikipedia example, right? How many of you guys have found a long-lost high school friend through Facebook? They just found you, right? Right? These are the mechanisms that are possible that are connecting the world. I mean, the internet, when it first started, right, we're just like, God, we can send email to everybody. We can see pictures, right? Now that it's integrated into our life into such a way, I don't think we're going back. I mean, you guys heard the news yesterday, right? Microsoft invested $240 million for 1.6% of a company that doesn't nearly have that much in revenue, right? So why would that be? Because we're on the apex now, and it is not going away, where we're going to be using the web to continually connect us, to help us create new content and information that we can share at blinding speed. And so I was talking a little bit with folks at lunch today about, so where are we going with Web 2.0? Is it going to continue to fold out? Yes, I think it's going to continue to move, but I think we're on the advent of kind of the next phase. And I don't want to call it Web 3.0. I kind of have it up here. Web 2.0, you ask a question, you get a lot of people to answer stuff. You've got to wade through a lot of stuff to get at it, right? You're seeing a lot of comments. I want to talk about a thought that I have that's around what I call Web 3.0, but let's just call it Web 2.0 plus. Okay, but I'm going to throw it up there as Web 3.0, make a differentiation to it. I think that Web 3.0 is about making sense of all that content that is actually starting to be created out there. Okay? Who loves surfing the web? Right? Who loves going to Google and getting lots and lots of links you got to click through and you got to get an answer? Not a lot of people, right? But it's a great tool to get you to the kind of the links that you need to go forward, right? And so my belief is that Web 2.0 plus and Web 3.0 is about looking at the web's data and starting to answer questions. If you got a question, you want an answer. You don't want more links. You want to get at a more digestible and condensed version of the answer to that question. Okay? So let me roll into Wize a little bit because I think it's related. So what are we trying to do at Wize? Well, first, I'm going to step back and talk about creating a company. And what has anybody started a company here? I think you have, right? A couple folks and yourself. So it's a bit of a, what do they say? Entrepreneurs are like manic depressives, except manic depressives can take medication, essentially. The whole process of becoming an entrepreneur is a lot of ups and downs to it. And why is that? Because things aren't established yet. You've got to grab something that's your idea, and you've got to actually take that and put some structure around it, and then put resources and fuel against it to kind of get it going. So before I get into Wize, I stopped at Web 2.0, started to talk about Wize, but I'm going to take you a little to the concept of creating a company because I think it's useful. So I'll boil it down. I won't talk completely about all the aspects of starting a company, but I want to talk to you guys about a framework that I think applies to life. I think it applies to running a business. And most certainly to me is the most important thing that you can think about if you want to start your own business. Okay? And it's definitely not mine. I didn't create this. It was taught to me. It's one of the first things I learned at P&G, Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble, I don't know if you guys study it much, but it's been around for 160 years. They've, the products they've created, Tide, Crest, I think we've all got them in our dorms somewhere. I don't live in a dorm, but I might at some point, again, if I go back to school. So the whole process of creating getting an idea right is something I call the need gap matrix. Okay? So how I dimensionalize it is this is importance, and this is the gap in satisfaction. Okay? Let me get my pen real quick, and we'll talk about how it applies and how people hit pitfalls a lot of times in businesses. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. Okay, third time's the charm. There we go. Okay, 2x2 matrices. Anybody work in a consulting firm? Ever have? People have heard of the 2x2 matrix scenario, right? Like you can boil everything down to a 2x2 matrix, and it's kind of a joke. Where do you always want to be in the 2x2 matrix? Can you take a guess? Upper right, right? So there's companies like McKinsey and BCG and Bain, these strategy management consulting firms, and it's always up to the right. They're showing you where to go. So what I want to lay out for you is the need gap matrix. And so the need gap matrix basically says that you want to build businesses on ideas that are very important to people that they're currently unsatisfied with. So let me give you an example. Who's happy with Google search? Raise your hand. Like, does it do a pretty good job for you? Do you know of something that does a better job? Do you know of how you'd fix it? Well, I think that if you actually surveyed the population, you'd find that a lot of people are very happy with Google search. It's pretty good. Doesn't mean there can't be improvement, but it stepped up and it gets you to pretty relevant links. And so the thing is, a search engine is very important to people, but there isn't a big gap in satisfaction on another search engine. Okay? I'm not saying that other search engines won't get created, and there might be another version of those to people, because people have tried to create them. But people are know it's important, and they're pretty happy already. So why go and try to create a business down here? Or actually, it's not here. It's the gap in satisfaction is right here. That's not a big idea, right? The alternative is that people pick things where there's a huge gap in satisfaction, like a left-handed gumball dispenser, right? There might be a bunch of left-handed people that don't like turning the knob with their right, the left. So to those people, there's a huge gap in satisfaction, but it's not very important to the general population. So that would be a bad thing to actually go create, right? So the key is find things that are super important that people currently are unhappy with, and you're going to create big businesses. And why I share that with you is that's the single most important thing that you should think about when you actually go out and create something. Okay? And what I'll do is I'll share with you kind of how I applied that to Wize. Wize is focused on improving the entire product research process. Okay? So I don't know, how many times have you guys, has anybody done any research online before they went and bought something? Here. A lot of folks, right? So the point is, it's a pretty important thing, okay? So I knew that because of all the people in my family that told me that, and I actually got a phone call from my father, who just retired, and he wanted to buy a computer so that he could actually start writing letters to his friends. So he called me, you know, his son from Silicon Valley, and you know, supposedly I should know all these things. And I went online and I went to Google and I flew around the net, and I couldn't help him find the right product. It was hard for me. And he went out the next day to a retailer and he spent time. He bought a really bad computer for way more than he should have. And that made me kind of upset, because I said, if my dad can't figure it out, how many more people can't figure this problem out? You know, or just get frustrated. And so I went and interviewed 100 people. I just called people I knew, a ton of folks. And I found out that a lot of people were having the same problem. They were just going to get links, and they couldn't remember where the product was, and they couldn't compare different things. They might be able to get prices in a price comparison place, but they couldn't figure out which products were best or worst. And that said to me, okay, it's very important, and the gap in satisfaction is very high. So therein lies the opportunity, okay? So I kind of like took that together with this idea of using the web as a sentiment database and saying, how could I take that information, start to mine it so I could answer questions, and build a business out of it? And so therein lies kind of where Wize got really conceived and confirmed, that said, go solve that problem. You'll have a lot of people that will be happy, and they'll be loyal customers to you. So Wize is really focused on becoming the consumer reports of the future. Has anybody heard of Consumer Reports here? Right? So Consumer Reports is a great magazine. It's been around for a long time. A lot of people still read it. It makes a lot of money. But they have one person that covers and rates a product that only uses it for a day, maybe less. And to me, that just wasn't enough data, right? There's this great book called The Wisdom of Crowds. Has anybody read it? Wisdom of Crowds. Okay, so bear with me here. So the concept essentially is Wisdom of Crowds is that any group of people is better than one expert at predicting or answering certain questions. Do you guys buy that? Sometimes, and it's true. It's certain questions not, but certain questions true. And so the analogy they look at is basically saying that, they basically said, hey, if you went to a county fair and there was a pig on a scale, and it was a contest to see who could determine how much the pig exactly weighed, what they did is they had a number of farmers come in and they gave a single guess. They didn't know, each didn't know, and they put it in an envelope. And then they took 30 random people from the crowd and brought them in, had them all guess, and they made a curve and found out where the average was. And every time, and maybe it was more than 30 people, the crowd did better than each expert at guessing the exact weight because of the average, right? Because at the end of the day, you're using statistics to help you get at what the true answer to that question is. That makes sense. And so what I'm getting at here is that the web is like the collective. The web is like the crowd. Essentially, you've got all these opinions of all these people from all over the place, discussion groups, blogs, user reviews, expert reviews, chiming in to what products are best. You can essentially take them and use them as the crowd. That helps you actually predict how good something truly is when you apply statistics to it. The second thing that we employed there was, you guys heard of a book called The Paradox of Choice? by Barry Schwartz, okay? And basically what it is that too much choice is bad. Does anybody believe that? You believe that? Who believes that too much choice is bad? Okay. So let me go through it with you real quick. Okay. Basically, paradox of choice basically says that the more freedoms we have, the better quality of living we're going to have. Okay? But that only works to a certain point, because once we get past a certain number of choices, life becomes hard. You know why? Because we feel silly or bad or incapable if we can't evaluate all those things. There's always someone else around the corner. There's always another choice I can make. There's a study they did where they actually had one type of jam and it did 100% sales. Then they went to 3 jams. People looked at it, strawberry and raspberry and grape, and they did more than 100% in sales. And then they went to 24 choices and sales dropped completely. Okay, why was that? Because people became paralyzed at the shelf because they didn't know which to choose. Boysenberry dark versus boysenberry light. Well, I don't know which one's better. And people don't want to feel stupid that they can't actually make a choice, that they walk away. It paralyzes people. And then we got this phenomenon going on in life. So one of the things we're trying to do at Wize is say, you don't need to look at 1 million products. How many cell phones, does anybody think that they make more than 500 cell phones a year, different versions a year? Different types of cell phones? Yes? No? Yeah, they definitely do. Between 500 to 1,000 different models of cell phones actually come out each year. That's a lot of cell phones to choose from, you know? And so the goal is to kind of reduce the amount of things you have to look at because you're looking at things that are actually most valuable. And those are 2 of the major components that actually get weaved into what we're trying to do at Wize, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's a little bit on Wize. Okay, starting a company. Anybody interested in starting? I could talk about that a little bit. Anybody want to start a company someday? A lot of folks, right? A lot of folks. Maybe some of you are in the technology business program here at UCSB, right? And I can't say that I wish I had the opportunity to take business classes when I was getting my engineering degree, because it would have helped me so much, open my eyes to tons of stuff. So I think that, and so I have a professor from Harvard who said to me, he came back, his name's Joe Lasseter, you can look him up online. He's the entrepreneurial marketing professor there, and he studied over 500 different businesses. You know, Harvard, we do this case study thing. We actually study a company, and it's like 35 or 40 pages. I read like 7,000 pages there of stuff, trying to get prepared for these things. And as an engineer, I memorized, you know, formulas and Grignard reagents and chemistry and things. When you had to read stuff, I didn't know how to read when I got back to business school. And you had to read all this stuff in case study. So learn how to read now. That's my biggest advice. But he has written over 500 cases, studied over 500 businesses. And what he said to me was, I've studied more businesses than ever. There's never been a greater time in history than now to start a company. Okay? Now. You guys are prepared. You may be starting them in college, you may be soon thereafter, or it may not be 10 years from now. Doesn't matter. I think that some of the same effects are going to be valuable to you. And why is it? Why is it a great time to start a company? Number one, access to capital. Okay? Works in 2 ways. There are many that we're starting as a nation here, starting to put in place different ways to actually get access to capital. It's always been small business loans and whatnot, but we have more active angel investing than we've ever had before. We have a very developed private equity and venture capital investment that's going on right now. We've got programs that are encouraging entrepreneurism in school, and I'm sure there's access to grants and businesses that are trying to fund different ideas. So the funding is there. Okay? Number 2, Moore's Law. Who knows what Moore's Law is? Right? Moore's Law. Who knows what open source software is? I know you guys know a lot of this stuff, so just calibrating. So those are 2 huge components, right, guys? Because Moore's Law is basically improving computing power to the effect where computers are doing things that weren't imaginable like 10 years ago, right? So you can get an incredible processor and run a business out of your dorm room if you wanted to, right? You literally could get going and have a web server running underneath your desk and get going, and I know a lot of people that have. Second thing is that you don't have to go build all this software from scratch. There's a lot of great stuff out in open source. You don't have to buy it. You don't got to build it. You can just put it together because you got a mind to go do it. Okay? So capital's there. You've got access to technology. Okay? We're deregulating and globalizing, so you can actually make money in China. There's PayPal International. There's all kinds of stuff to kind of deal with currency and all that stuff. And, you know, we were talking about this at lunch. Failure is a badge of honor. I'm not saying go out and seek to fail, but don't be scared, right? If you've got an idea that passes that sniff test and you love to do it and you're ready to go do it. What's stopping you, you know? Failing, the statistics still hold the same. For every Facebook or Google, there's a lot of failures. What percentage do you guys think of startups fail? What do you think? What do you think? 10%? 20%? 95? Right? It's high, right? 80%. You look inquisitive, so that's why I was looking at you. I thought you had the answer. So 80% fail, roughly. Statistics may be plus or minus, but 80% fail. So guess what? You know, I remember showing up my freshman year in college, and they said, look to the left, look to the right. One person's not going to be here in a year, right? We would get 5 of us in a row, and they'd say, only one of you is going to be here, like in a certain period of time. So what? Because at the end of the day, you can start a bunch of companies in your lifetime as long as you're learning and making smart decisions. Okay? So my point is that people like to go out and find failed entrepreneurs and hire them into companies because they've learned something along the way. Okay? So we've got a society that's encouraging a bunch of this stuff. So all I can tell you is there's never been a greater time in history to start incubating your ideas. Some of my friends just keep pads of papers of ideas that they have, and they continue to like play with them and work on them. The idea for doing Wize probably was kicking around in a notebook somewhere for 2 years. I didn't really quite figure it out, but I knew there was something there and I had to play around with it. Geez, you guys got so much more time on me. So take those notebooks and have your best ideas. Lock it away from your roommate, don't let them steal it and all that stuff. But keep that and get all those good ideas together, because I guarantee you there's going to be a couple guys in this room, girls, that are going to do a few cool things. And we're going to read about it. And it could be you. So say you got the idea. Say you just said, I'm going to go do this thing. What do you need to think about? My biggest advice is to think about people, right? Some of us maybe can build stuff on our own. It's going to be singular business. Think about who you'd partner with. Fit is a very important thing. It doesn't mean you're just working with your friends, but my biggest advice if you're going to take a partner is make sure that you have the same objectives. Some people do things just for money. It's the way of the world. Some people do things just for money. Some people love the idea of doing great things. I remember when John Doerr, who's a famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, just spoke at Web 2.0 conference that was just up there. And he was talking about Sergey Brin and Larry Page from Google, and they invested in Google. And he was talking about how they asked John Doerr, he goes, did you ever think Google would be this big? And he said, no. He said, but I asked Larry Page, and he looked me right in the eye and dead said, I think we could do $10 billion in sales. And that was a long time ago. That was 10 years ago. He looked him right in the eye and didn't even bat an eye. He said, and this is how I did my calculation. And so the point is, did Larry really know? No, but he sat there with conviction and said, I can see the opportunity, and I'm going to go for it. And I guess I would say that that's half the battle, believing and having confidence that even though a lot of people are saying you're crazy and you don't have all the data, you step out and you try. You step out and you try with conviction. And this is where these great stories come from. I want to share with you real quick, because I think I'm running towards the end of my speaking time, kind of this last thing that I think is very important. So when you get going, when you get that big idea, and you've got the guts to step over and say, I'm an entrepreneur now, and I'm going to do it, and you get running, I'm going to share this lesson that I hope you remember, okay? 3 things kill startups, okay? And it's notorious. And they're kind of all related, but I'm just going to segment them out for you. The first thing that kills a startup is lack of focus. And lack of focus is that there's a ton of stuff to do, and people get scattered, and they start doing all kinds of stuff. And all of a sudden, that time you had and that money you had and all that stuff, you try to do 5 or 10 things at once. It's hard to be good when you're doing 5 or 10 things at once. It's almost impossible to be great. Okay? Things that kill startups are people decide they're going to do a whole bunch of stuff, but don't focus on the core principles. If you talk to the people at Facebook, they're completely focused for a long period of time just on the user experience. I don't know if you guys use Facebook. Do you see how you click stuff, and easily you see people up, and that newsfeed thing is great because you see what's happening in everybody else's life? Focus, focus, focus on user experience. I don't know if do you guys like that? It's kind of cool, right? I mean, you're getting an idea of what everybody's doing, who's out partying, where people are. So they focused on user experience, and they got it right. Google focused on the search engine and getting page rank right. Focus on what's core to your business, because you start getting distracted, you'll be like another company that's in the dead pool. Number 2, you see my giant head right here? Okay, that's ego. Ego founder. Okay? What usually kills a lot of companies is that somebody being right and somebody being more important than the company usually gets in the way. And I can't tell you how many times that kills company because nobody is doing things that make customers happy. I talked to you guys about customers to start. They're doing things to make people internally happy. And unfortunately, that kills. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a project team here at school at UCSB, and you've got a person who's just trying to be right rather than getting the project done the best as possible. Anybody ever been in a study group like that or a project team? That kills things getting done, right, guys? So it works the same way in startups, okay? And the last thing, and they're both related, money. You can't run out of money, okay? You got to buy a server or pay the bill and you don't have any money, you're in trouble. So cash is king. We used to say that all the time, cash is king. Okay, so that was me ranting for about 50 minutes. I hope I shared a few things you can take away. I wasn't really sure what we'd cover, but we covered a lot of stuff. So having said that, I think, Bill, we have 10 minutes? Okay. So any question is open. I take questions, okay? In the back.
So how do you go out and just meet other entrepreneurs, other people, and talk to them?
Okay, so that's a great question. Well, I think here's what's really interesting, I think. And something that I would say has worked a lot for me. I'll tell you, I came from a very small town in upstate New York, and I had about 0 connections in life. I didn't know anybody. And I think the first place it starts, just in general with connections, is your school. You guys got a great school. In fact, I got into grad school here to get my PhD here, but I decided to go work first, and then I got deluded and went and got a business degree and stuff. But my point is that the school's probably got some great alumni here that are entrepreneurs that have done some pretty cool things. And what I found when I was going through all this is how surprising it was for just to email somebody and ask them, they actually email you back and actually want to talk to you. It's surprising, right? You're kind of going, why would they want to talk to me? But the amazing thing I think about life is, as you start to kind of get older is that, you know, there's something I kind of call business karma. You know, you guys know this concept, karma? You do good, good comes back. Well, believe me, guys, it's all related. You're not going to outrun your bad karma. It'll catch you eventually. And your good karma is going to come back at some point. And I learned lessons the hard way and a great way in life. And so my point is that, will everybody return your phone call? You know, probably not, or email. But you'd be surprised at how many people you ask in just a very polite way. People want to tell their story. And you'd be surprised at who they connect you with along the way. I can't tell you how many people I love to help now get going on stuff, because what good is knowledge when I'm dead? You know, it's opportunity to help people because I didn't get a chance to get it myself, but a few people along the way helped me out, and it was a big deal. So I think that's one thing. Use your school, ask, I think that, you know, you guys probably have opportunities for internships and places we're going to go. There's all kinds of local things that go on. So I know, for instance, in Silicon Valley, and again, it's the only thing I can speak of, there are lists where they actually list every cool event that's out there. Like Stanford has this thing called BASES, which is an engineering kind of thing, and any school can use it. I mean, I didn't go to Stanford, but I still look at the BASES thing, and it says, here are all the different speakers that are coming and different events and all that stuff, and you just show up, and you'd be surprised who you can meet or interact with kind of in the whole way. I would say that there are a couple cool things. Does anybody know what TechCrunch is? Right? TechCrunch, right? And so my point is, if you're interested in Web 2.0, read TechCrunch every day and read about all the different companies. And look at the cool ones, and honestly, apply for an internship or seek out to meet the CEO or the VP of marketing there. You're surprised at how many of you psyched to talk to you. Okay? So use the web. Effectively, you can get to people faster than whatever. I read this book called Stumbling on Happiness, and I just said, okay, the author was this person. I found his email address online. I just emailed him, and he asked a couple questions with me. It's like, how does this happen? We got the web, guys. So go find your person and don't stop until they talk to you. Okay, next question. Go ahead.
You talk about a lot of stuff what's popular today, like Facebook and Google. Do you think it's bad if we're trying to do a startup that's kind of like something like that, or should we just think out of the box and go on a different tangent?
Yeah, it's a good question. So back to this. Like, I'm not saying Facebook is one, but how many more community sites do we want to join, right? So the question is like, all right, I'm already using X, something called switching costs. To move all your pictures and all your friends to the next one, right, will be tougher thing to do. So I would say that if you got a killer idea that's different, you know, don't stop if it passes this kind of need gap and port and sniff test. But my advice is go where they're not. There's like a lot of investment theories that says when everybody's buying high, don't buy. Go buy when they're buying, go buy when the stock is low and things like that. And I think the same thing applies in entrepreneurism. When everybody gets caught up in a wave or some hyper phenomenon, go somewhere else, surprisingly. So my advice is not, it's hard to say because I don't know what your idea is, but I would say that all things being equal, go to some new spot because no one's done it yet. No one's tried to do it. Go someplace where somebody hasn't actually solved that problem yet. Makes sense.
One comment about that is with the venture capitalists who have a tremendous lemming instinct.
Yes.
So if everybody else is doing it, you can get money. And if they're not, you won't.
Yeah, that's true. I think that, I think you can get money for, I would say that I think you can get money for anything if it's a good idea. And I think there's a phenomenon of the lemming scenario, but there's a lot of also bad investments that are done out there. Venture capitalists aren't necessarily clairvoyant, and they work on a diversified portfolio strategy, right? Where they only need a few things to go in. So what happens is a lot of venture capitalists say, I've got to have a bet on a community, I've got to have a bet on a search engine, I've got to have a bet on that, and you become their bet. But it doesn't necessarily mean as an entrepreneur, I want to be the bet that's hedging them against X. As an entrepreneur, if I have my choices, I'd rather be working on something very unique and cool, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do with Wize is basically say, look, no one's done this before. I want to apply math and science and crawling and machine learning to this whole commerce thing. People are like, no, all the shopping comparator engines is doing this way. Why are you doing it this way? Well, because it hasn't been done before. That's why, and it's still a problem. So I'm with you. If you looked at it from the vein of financing, you could basically say, well, I can still get financed, but I'm not sure that getting financing, a lot of people think financing is the thing that says you made it, and actually, it's nowhere near, right? That makes sense.
I'll assume that you're trying to get users to be on your site and be like Wize users and reviewers, etc. I'm starting a website now, and I'm having the problem of strategizing how to get users to generate content.
Yeah.
how do you go about, you know, it'll work very, very well, but you need the users.
Yeah.
So how are you going about doing that?
Well, our model, right, is one where we're aggregating. So what we're saying is that content is being created everywhere. So we're searching and indexing it and making sense of it wherever it lies. So I'm not dependent upon creating content. I'm utilizing this growing amount of content that's on the web. But I will answer your question about growing sites and communities. And so if any of you guys are going to start a community site, listen up, okay? The key to a community site to get content to grow, okay, is, remember I talked to you about that 1% of people that creates a majority of it? That phenomenon will hold true in just about every different site. So here are the fundamental rules of growing a community site. Number one, the people that it starts off with will ultimately be representative of the people it most likely grows with, okay? So MySpace, you think the guys who started it, they lived in LA, they like rock music, and they partied a bunch, right? What will you see inside MySpace? You're going to see a lot of pseudo partying stuff. You're going to see music. You're going to see a ton of things there. Facebook, right, started at Harvard, right? And it started in the Ivy League, right? It started in colleges, right? So majority of what you're seeing is a lot of the college folks, and it moved from college to college to college, right? Yelpers basically started, I don't know if you guys have ever used Yelp, in San Francisco. There's a lot of guys in their 20s that are very opinionated about food. They love food, and they had a lot of opinions about it. Orkut, right, is Google search or community, right? It actually became Brazilian. It's the biggest social network in Brazil, because the Brazilian population took it over. And so what I'm getting at is that think about how you're seeding your community first, because it will have ripple effects. And it makes sense, right? Viral. Who am I going to invite? More people like me. More people like me that are doing more things like me. That's number one. Number two, and this is probably the most important thing about generating content, is you have got to solve or to provide a psychological reward for those people that are doing stuff on your site. So the example is that I write a review and I don't hear anything about it. Nobody loves it, nobody reads it, I don't get a reward. The way Yelp is built, a lot of their folks there, is that you can become a Yelp Elite. You know what that means? That means you get to go to some cool parties, okay? And you get to have some great food and some great wine. And you get to have more power over the community, okay? How do you get that? Because you have more people that have said, you've provided a great comment that I think is great, you're cool, etc. And so it's human nature, right? If you take me to a place and you tell me I'm cool 10 times, that's a cooler place than if I go to a place and there's nobody there and nobody cares, or you tell me I stink, you know? I'm going to the place where I'm going to be cool, because I need that. I got a fragile ego, right? And so my point is that that's the same thing with communities. You have to find ways to reward those individuals that are essentially doing the work for you. So you got to get it going small and then nurture it. And so that's my song and dance on social communities, user-generated content. Okay, well, I think that I am out of time, and all I can say is thank you for being so attentive. And, you know,